Hello and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today we have Allan Knabe of APIable.io. How are you doing, Alan?
Good, thanks. Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So what we want to do today is we want to talk about the API hype cycle. And I'm always very curious where people think we are and what happens. And you've started a business about a year ago around API portals. And I think you have some good observations and insights into how the API space has been evolving and how companies are maybe looking at things differently. So what is your observation of the general hype cycle? I think we all know the model of how we're moving along.
Yeah, it's a good question. So what we're seeing now is that we're kind of leaving this trough of disillusionment, and we're slowly climbing the slope of enlightenment with a lot of these parts of the APIs. The one thing that in particular drew my attention was that API portals, especially banking API portals, are now gradually climbing this slope of enlightenment. And I think a lot of that is due to the banks that created API portals maybe 5 years ago due to regulation, PSD2 and so on. And at that time, they were forced to do it, and they didn't really understand, what the value of these things were at that point. Now they've had time a little bit to digest that, understand, okay, well, what is this API thing about? What's the value there? And there are some really good examples out there now of banks who have been able to create some great APIs, put them on a really nice portal. And so that's why I think we're starting to see this climb up now.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to look at APIs either as something that you have to do, and then you just do it. But in the end, like how you do business and how you envision yourself doing business in the future doesn't change much. And then I think it's also probably clear that, APIs they're not magic, so they won't change much. But on the other hand, like you say, there are good examples out there. One of the ones that we've talked to actually on this channel is Commerzbank in Germany. And I think what differentiates them a little bit maybe from others is that they have really started thinking about APIs as a central building block of their business, not just we need to have some APIs, so let's do that. But they really have started thinking about how do we reinvent ourselves as an API first bank. And I think that makes the big difference there. Is that a thinking that you see in more and more banks and organizations, or is that something where you still would say, well, that happens, but maybe it's still a little bit more the exception than the norm?
It's coming. It's gaining momentum. We still have a really broad spread, to be honest. When I consult different people, you see, I think most people now at least understand what an API is, right? So in comparison to maybe even 5 years ago, I hardly ever hear like people say, okay, well, what is an API? And that used to come all the time, and I'd have to think of these really abstract ways of explaining what an API is, but I don't hear that question so often anymore. So I think we've come a long way already over the space of 2 years. And now the people are starting to talk more about, okay, what's the value of this thing, right? That's what I hear a lot. We were talking back in the day about value proposition interfaces at Swisscom is one of the things. It's a value proposition. And that's where we've kind of caught up to now is organizations saying, okay, some real smart people. We're working with an insurance company in France, and they were really getting behind the concept of the API and really trying to make them a success within the organization. So we're making some really good progress now, I'd say.
And it's interesting. I don't even know exactly why, but yesterday I ran into this very old presentation by John Musser and I looked it up, it's from 2013 about API business models. And that was so interesting because even back then, right, and that has been a while ago, he has this whole tree of different ways of how you can make money with APIs, a lot of them indirect. And I think that's something where we still see sometimes like a little bit too narrow idea of what does it mean to really improve your business with APIs, right? There's this kind of weird thinking that if I don't charge for my API, then I don't make money with the API. And that's a mindset that actually I still see a fair bit, which I find confusing to me. It's like, it's not like companies would only have this possibility, but it still seems to be something that is very much on the minds of many people who think about APIs and how to use them to be successful.
Right. And when it comes to the monetization, and this has been something that we've been talking about like over these past like 8-9 years now, since 2013, effectively. We've done a lot of talk, and I remember at Swisscom we implemented that whole monetization module there as well, but we never actually really did anything with it. We tried really hard, but we just couldn't quite manage it. Where I think we're better positioned to do monetization nowadays is that when we live the API as a product, or API products, when you design one from that product management perspective, you must have a business case, right? There has to be a business case in there. So you're saying, okay, who the target customer is, what you want to achieve, what are the business goals for this API? And there you're either talking, okay, it's either something, you're cost saving, or you're doing some sort of strategic lock-in with your customers. But we're also seeing some monetization cases as well, direct monetization. And it's the product management which is driving them. We have much clearer ideas since 2013 about what we're supposed to be doing with these things.
That's a good point. I guess for every API that you would design and manage that way with a clear product management mindset, right? There should be this one way of documenting it. Is like, how is it contributing to my business, right? And that doesn't need to be direct, but it doesn't need to be explicit. I mean, not direct in terms of generating money directly, right? But being part of a value chain. And I think that is the part where we can still maybe get better at documenting things really as products and not just at the technical level. And this is something where I also think that the building blocks that we use, the tools that we use, like portals, could become better also at supporting this kind of thing. They're very much developer focused right now. They're not so much business focused. And I think that is something where I'm excited to see that, at least in some cases, it becomes more and more also something where we're managing business building blocks and not just, open API thingies.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's, I think we spoke last time about this as well, about having these two different roles, the business personas who come to the portal, and they're the ones, often making the decisions on if we use the API or not. And you have to be able to convince them first and invite the developer at the right time. So we've been talking about great developer experience, but when a developer tries to use an API and they get put in an approval queue for 2 weeks, it's not great developer experience, right? The developers hate that kind of thing. If they can't use it within 30 seconds, then you lose them, right? So it could be that, you have to sign contracts and things like this, right? And then maybe you need someone a bit higher up the food chain to take care of that kind of contractual stuff. And then say, okay, now is the right time to invite the developer. And look, these are the APIs that we've paid for. This is the specific documentation. This is like the plan we're on. And the developer can just get straight to work without having to do anything around it. So that's kind of our philosophy, is really to say, okay, developer is still very important, especially as like a user of the portal. And then you have maybe, these more, let's say, business personas around it as well.
So what you're producing is a portal that's mostly outward facing, right? If I understand correctly, it's mostly for APIs that you want to expose to partners or the public. What are some of the, let's say, obstacles that you're seeing when you're going to the market, which is kind of like a little bit specialized offering, right? Where it clearly is something that is useful for a lot of companies, but then it's also just this one building block, so to speak, right, in this whole API tool chain that you need. So what are some of the obstacles that you're experiencing there?
Well, I guess the biggest obstacle is due to like size of company. We when we talk to like, you know, the larger players, they quite often have like an Excel sheet with a whole bunch of questions, which includes how many years have you been running, how many million turnover do you have, and
Okay.
you know, to even qualify to be considered, you have to tick a lot of boxes, right? So that's probably one of the biggest obstacles we have in talking to larger players, which I find quite strange because so many organizations choose to build their own API portal. So they will then hire some external company, and they will, you know, bring something up in PHP or something crazy, and I say, here you go, and then they have to maintain it going forwards, right? Which for me doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, if it's really something that's extremely strategic to the organization, so if you're, you know, in I don't know, fintech, and your only product is an API, absolutely, you should probably build out that entire thing and own your code there. If you're an organization who's running an API program on the side, building and maintaining your own API portal, I mean, the money aside, it's the time invest on that, right? You're talking at least 9 months, right? At least 9 months to get an API portal up and running.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, and still a lot of companies are trying to do it, right? We just recently we had a backstage conversation here, and it was the same kind of observation, right? It's like you can pretty much walk into any bigger company and just ask them, right? Show me your homegrown portal, and they will have something.
Right.
They all have it.
Exactly.
But like you say, it does, in many cases, it probably doesn't make sense to do that. It's not the core business of the organization. It's just something that they probably should have, and make sure that they get it. Like, the one thing that I sometimes find interesting is that from the company point of view that is getting API tooling, I still oftentimes find it a little strange, so to speak, or not ideal, that they hope that they can get everything just from one place, right? Like, give me the one solution that ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
And I understand that from a number of viewpoints, right? It's easier to just deal with one vendor and all these kind of things. And of course, it would be nice if we had the perfect solution that does everything for us. On the other hand, in a space as dynamic as the API space, it seems to me that if that's your expectation, you're really limiting yourself a lot, right? And you're kind of missing out on all the exciting things. And I think that is something where we as an API community, we have to do more education, or we have to be better at communicating to people. Look, like, API tooling should use APIs as well, right? And you should assemble your API tooling like you're trying to assemble your own API, so to speak, right? And I think that is something that I don't see as much as I would like to.
Yeah. So it's this concept of eating your own dog food, effectively, right?
Yes.
We see it too, and it is, especially like if you're an enterprise architect in an organization. Enterprise architects, generally speaking, like to take everything from one vendor, check all the boxes there, and say, okay, now the solution is there. We just unpack it and start using it. But what I've seen, and is really kind of the mission of APIable, is the amount of time it takes to get going from unpacking this API management software and getting it like live in production. It takes a long time, like about 1 year, to really get it up and running. And I think what we in the API community can do is say, okay, especially operate in that space there, like this over the top space, Because I think the vendors are very good at API management now. I think that's, a piece that we've been doing for a long time, and we're good at it. It's stable. But helping API programs to reduce that time from 12 months down to maybe like 1 month. And I think a lot of these over-the-top pieces, as I call them, are coming into play. So, security as a service there with APIs. There's our API pull as a service. We have the monetization piece in there as well. There's, OAuth type things as well that you can put in there. It's all of these things that you spend months talking about when you first start an API program. If we can sort of provide those pieces over the top as like plugins to your existing API management software, then it's about reducing that time for me. That's the mission.
Yep, reducing that time, that's one good thing. And I think the other thing really is, in the same way as we talk about APIs being good because they give you building blocks, and if you don't like one API, you can just consume the same service from another API, and it shouldn't be too hard to switch because hopefully, right, it's something you can easily do. I think the same should be true for our tooling, where we should really focus more on being able to say, oh, we don't like that portal anymore, we get a different one. Or maybe we even have two, and see how well they're doing for a while, and then we make that decision. And I do think that this may be happening in the future, in the not too distant future, because one thing that I see that I think we're going more towards not just focusing on the production parts, like you said, like the production part, we're pretty good. Like now we know how to secure APIs, how to manage them, how to do kind of fundamental, API mechanics, so to speak. But I think now we see more and more consumption focus, and companies really understanding that to be successful with APIs, they need to be consumed. They don't just need to exist.
Exactly.
And I think like the more you can throw tooling at this, right, and say, hey, we need better adoption of our APIs, right? Like, let's try this, right? And I think the better you become at not just trusting your one vendor, but being able to also throw in new like little building blocks, right? And say, let's try this. I think the more you will actually also be able to improve success of your APIs. And in the end, that's also your mission, right? Is make APIs that exist more successful without necessarily being part of the production. You're very much on the consumption side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way of describing it, on the consumption side. And that starts again. I always come back to product management because I love product management. And consumability of something. The biggest thing means that you make something that people want, right? That's the first thing, and package it in such a way that you can make it consumable. And we're very poor at that, right? So we create APIs and we throw them up and say, if you build it, they will come, right? That traditionally is something we've done, and I'm thinking also as well if I came across a bank in India where they had this big banner saying, okay, we have 1,000 APIs available. Wow, that's a massive number. I think they were in competition with another bank as well, but who had the most APIs. But when you kind of like got into it, I registered on the portal because I was interested, and no one ever gave me access or reply to any emails, etc. So there's no consumability about that at all. And actually, a lot of the APIs on there should never have been on that portal, right? They were like very internal system APIs that they should probably not have exposed.
1,000 sounds suspicious, yes. And it seems to me, I've seen the exact same kind of thing, and I find it really interesting to just understand the dynamics behind that, right? And I think in many cases, it's just like strange KPIs, where somebody's success is defined by the number of APIs they're putting out, right? Yeah. So that's what they keep doing. They crank out those APIs, and then there's no shortage of APIs you can crank out if your main mission is cranking them out.
That's what we did in 2014, right? We were measured by the number of APIs we produced, and we produced a lot of APIs that year.
That was a Swisscom.
Yeah.
How many did you end up with? Like, did you ever hit 1,000?
I remember we had all this technical debt from it, but not 1,000, no. But I'd say 50 or 60. But a lot of those were basically duplicates of one another with one field that was different and one consumer. But we're and the bosses were like, "Hey, great going, guys! Lots of APIs. This is fantastic."
Lots of APIs.
It's also a telltale sign when you have one-to-one consumer, right? An API, and it has just one consumer. That's a sign that you did something wrong.
That's a very good point. I've seen that also at companies who say, yeah, we have hundreds of APIs. And then you go through those and, it's like, A, tell me what they do. B, tell me how many consumers you have, right? And then C is explain to me how this thing actually drives value. And in many cases, a lot of companies, they cannot answer basically to any of those things, or not in the way that you would hope they would if they were well-managed API products. But things are looking hopeful then, it seems to me. It's we're going, I think we're understanding more and more where we should be going. And from what I got from our conversation before this video, right, is that also things are going well for you. I think you are seeing more willingness, let's say, in organizations to experiment with this kind of thing, right? And say, in order to get out of the trough of disillusionment, we need to be a little bit more flexible maybe in how we think about tooling. So is that, do you think you're on that, you're walking upwards to the plateau of productivity?
Absolutely, yeah. We're definitely getting there. As we're running 4 pilots at the moment. Hopefully, we'll do a couple more pilots. But piloting this thing out really to learn from our customers. Okay, what they really need from this, and we're seeing that willingness to try something different, to try something new, rather than the things that either come out of the box or then trying to build their own portal, etc. So. But we're definitely getting there. Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to now be in this API space. People have kind of gotten the idea. It took a long time, and we're definitely coming up this slope now to the plateau in some cases. So it's really an exciting time.
I agree. I think it is, and I think it will only get more interesting with more and more things being covered by specialized offerings, right? And the better we get at actually putting those together, I think the sooner we will get up to the plateau.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Allan, thanks a lot for taking the time. I think it was really interesting to hear a little bit about your experience and where we are on the general hype cycle space. And I wish you all the best for APIable. I'm sure you're off to a great future with portals. And thanks again for being here. And thanks everybody for watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.